You should have kept your mouth shut. Officer Brennan's voice cracked through the salt air as two uniformed men dragged her toward the edge of the patrol boat. Her sneakers scraped against the wet deck, leaving desperate marks across the metal grating. The ocean beneath them churned with an unsettling violence, dark shapes circling just below the surface, their fins slicing through the moonlit water like blades through silk. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine and the waves crashing against the hull. "Please, I won't say anything. I swear I won't." "Too late for that," Officer Maddox interrupted, his grip tightening around her arm. His face was shadowed, but his eyes reflected something far more dangerous than anger, fear masked as cruelty. "Before we go on, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of real justice and comment your city below. This story will leave you speechless." She tried to plant her feet, to find purchase on something solid, but her body was already halfway over the rail. The water below looked black, endless, hungry. The fins circled faster now, drawn by the commotion, by the vibrations of struggle traveling through the water like dinner bells ringing in the deep. "Nobody will ever know," Brennan muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His voice carried the hollow conviction of a man trying to believe his own lie. They pushed. Her scream tore through the night as gravity claimed her, pulling her down toward the churning darkness. The impact stole her breath, cold water swallowing her whole, filling her ears with a roaring silence that felt like death itself. She plunged beneath the surface, her lungs burning, her body tumbling in the current as the boat's propellers churned the water above into violent foam. Panic clawed at her mind, screaming at her to thrash, to fight, to do something. But beneath the chaos, through the terror that threatened to consume her, a voice emerged, calm, steady, familiar, her father's voice. "When you're in the water, baby girl, you become the water. You don't fight the ocean. You respect it. You listen to it. And if you're smart, if you're patient, it'll carry you home." The officers above watched for a moment, their flashlights scanning the dark water where she'd disappeared. The fins continued their circling dance, closer now, tightening their radius like a noose. Brennan clicked off his flashlight first. "Let's go," he said quietly. "It's done." Maddox hesitated, his light still trained on the spot where she'd gone under. "What if she's gone? Look at those fins. She's already gone!" The boat roared back to life, its spotlight sweeping once more across the water before turning away. Within minutes, the sound of the engine faded into the distance, leaving only the whisper of waves and the cry of distant seagulls. But beneath the surface, she wasn't drowning. She was remembering. Her body had gone still, arms spread wide, suspended in the water column like a statue. Her eyes were open despite the salt burn, watching the shadows move around her in lazy, curious circles. Bull sharks, at least 3 of them, maybe more lurking in the darkness beyond her vision. "Sharks don't want to eat you, Aria," her father had told her years ago, his hands gentle as he held her in the shallows of a Bahamian bay. "They're curious. They're cautious. But if you panic, if you splash and scream like prey, you become prey. Stay calm, stay still. Let them investigate. Then move slowly, deliberately, like you belong there." Aria forced her heartbeat to slow, counting in her head, despite her lungs screaming for air. She let herself sink slightly, her movements minimal, non-threatening. One of the sharks passed close enough that she could see the black pit of its eye, ancient and emotionless. It bumped her leg, a test, a question. She didn't flinch. The shark circled once more, then banked away, its interest fading. The others followed, their forms melting back into the deep like ghosts returning to their graves. Only then did Aria kick upward, breaking the surface with a gasp that felt like resurrection. She sucked in air, her body shaking from cold and shock and something else, something that felt dangerously close to rage. The boat was gone. The horizon stretched empty in every direction except one, far in the distance. Barely visible against the night sky, a light blinked. Steady, artificial. Hope. But first, She needed to survive the night. Something solid bumped against her back. She spun, heart hammering, expecting another shark. Instead, she found herself face to face with one of the barrels, the same toxic waste containers the officers had been dumping illegally, the same ones she'd recorded them unloading just 24 hours ago. 24 hours. Had it really been just one day since everything changed? The memory surfaced like the barrel, stark, unavoidable, poisonous. She'd walked into the Harbor Point police station on a Thursday morning, her laptop bag heavy with evidence, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. The station smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork, its fluorescent lights humming overhead like dying bees. "I need to report illegal dumping," she'd said to the desk sergeant, a heavy-set man whose nameplate read Martinez. "Near the protected reef zone off Miller's Bay. Chemical waste. Industrial grade. Someone's going to get hurt if another eco-warrior?" Martinez hadn't even looked up from his computer. "Listen, lady, we get about 5 of these calls a week. Kids see some trash floating, think it's a conspiracy. We're busy with actual crimes." "This isn't trash," Aria insisted, opening her laptop. "I have water samples. I have GPS coordinates. You have an overactive imagination." Another officer had appeared beside her, younger, his smile sharp and dismissive. His badge read Brennan. "Those reefs have been fine for decades. But hey, if you want to file a formal complaint, fill out this form." He dropped a thick stack of papers on the counter. In triplicate, she'd filled out the forms. All of them. She'd submitted her evidence, her samples, her documented findings as a marine safety researcher with the Coastal Environmental Institute. She'd done everything right, everything legal, everything by the book. And they'd laughed at her. "Eco-activist nonsense," she'd heard one officer mutter as she left. But Aria had learned long ago that when people refused to listen, you had to make them see. That night, she'd returned to the bay alone, her equipment packed in waterproof cases, her father's old dive watch secure on her wrist. The pier stretched into the darkness like a finger pointing towards secrets, and she'd followed it with the patience her father had taught her. "Good science requires good observation," he used to say. "Don't tell people what you think is happening. Show them. Evidence doesn't lie." She'd set up her camera beneath the pier, hidden among the barnacle-crusted supports, its lens trained on the open water. Then she'd waded in with her testing kit, collecting samples from the water column, documenting the chemical signatures that screamed contamination. That's when the boat appeared, a police patrol boat, its running lights dim, moving slowly through the restricted zone. She'd frozen waist-deep in the water, her camera capturing everything as the boat stopped near the reef marker. 2 officers, she'd recognize them anywhere now, Brennan and Maddox, began rolling heavy barrels off the stern, each one splashing into the protected waters with sickening thuds that carried across the quiet bay. Her hands had shaken as she adjusted the camera's zoom, making sure every detail was recorded. The badge numbers, the patrol boat's identification numbers, the barrels themselves, marked with hazard symbols that glowed briefly in the boat's spotlight before disappearing beneath the waves. She'd uploaded the footage immediately to her secure cloud storage, her fingers moving fast, her breath faster. The file uploaded just as she heard footsteps on the pier above her head. "Who's down there?" She'd run then, her equipment abandoned, her feet pounding against wet sand as flashlights swept the beach behind her. She'd made it home, locked her doors, and spent the night staring at her ceiling, wondering if she'd done the right thing, if the evidence would be enough, if anyone would care. The next morning, they'd come for her. The knock on her door had been professional, almost polite. "Miss Chen? Harbor Point Police. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about your complaint." Questions? She'd opened the door a crack, the chain still latched. "I already filed my report. I gave you everything. Just some follow-up," Brennan had said, his smile rehearsed. "Won't take long. We want to make sure we understand your concerns." Something in his voice had made her skin crawl. But what choice did she have? They were police officers. This was official business. She was a law-abiding citizen with nothing to hide. She'd been so naive. The patrol boat hadn't headed toward the station. It had headed toward open water, the city shrinking behind them until it was just a sparkle on the horizon. She'd noticed too late. The GPS turned off, the radio silent, the body cams blinking red, but recording only what they wanted recorded. You wanted to save the ocean, Brennan had said, his mask finally slipping to reveal the desperation underneath. Let's see if it saves you. Now, clinging to the barrel in the middle of the Atlantic, Arya understood with perfect clarity that she'd stumbled onto something bigger than illegal dumping. This was systematic. This was organized. This was corruption deep enough to kill for. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the world in stark white and deep shadow. Thunder followed seconds later, and the sea began to churn with new violence. A storm was coming. Rolling in from the east like divine judgment, Arya wrapped her arms around the barrel, her body already going numb from cold, her mind calculating distances and currents and survival odds. The light she'd seen earlier, the research station, had to be at least 3 miles away. Maybe 4. In calm seas, an easy swim for someone with her training. But these weren't calm seas. And she wasn't just fighting the ocean anymore. She was fighting men who'd thought killing her was easier than answering her questions. Men who'd weaponized their authority to protect their crimes. Men who'd made one catastrophic mistake. They'd underestimated her. When things get hard, baby girl, her father's voice whispered through her memory. You remember where you come from. You remember who taught you to swim. And you remember that the ocean doesn't care about fear or fairness. It only cares about will. So the question is, how strong is your will to survive? Arya kicked her legs, adjusting her position on the barrel, pointing herself toward the distant light. Rain began to fall, fat drops that dimpled the water's surface and soaked her hair, mixing with the salt water already coating her skin. Stronger than you know, she whispered to the storm, to the ocean, to the men who'd tried to silence her. Stronger than you'll ever know. She began to swim. Hours blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and cold. Arya's world shrank to just the barrel beneath her arms, the rhythm of her kicks, the distant light that refused to grow closer no matter how hard she swam. The storm raged around her, waves lifting her high, then dropping her into valleys of dark water that felt like falling into space. Her father had taught her to swim in these islands when she was 6 years old. His big hands supporting her back as she learned to float, to trust the water's buoyancy, to understand that drowning was almost always a choice made from panic rather than physics. The ocean will hold you if you let it, he'd said, but you have to stop fighting it first. She stopped fighting. She let the waves carry her when they moved in the right direction, conserved her energy during the lulls, and kept her eyes locked on that light. Closer now, definitely closer. The silhouette of the research platform emerged from the darkness. Angular, industrial, beautiful. Her arms had gone beyond pain into numbness. Her lips were blue. Her body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. She knew the kind of cold that made people hallucinate, made them give up, made them slip quietly beneath the surface wearing a smile. But Arya wasn't smiling. She was calculating. 50 more yards. 40. 30. The platform's support legs loomed out of the water like ancient pillars, covered in barnacles and mussels, slick with algae. A ladder ran up one side, and Arya aimed for it with the last reserves of her strength. Her fingers touched metal, and her grip was so weak she almost slid off. She tried again, forcing her frozen hands to close around the rungs. One pull. Then another. Her body felt like concrete, but she climbed. Rung by rung, inch by inch, she dragged herself up out of the water that had almost become her grave. At the top, she collapsed on the platform's deck, her chest heaving, her vision swimming. Lights appeared above her, voices, hands lifting her gently. Jesus Christ, where did she come from? Get blankets. She's hypothermic. Is she breathing? Check her pulse. Arya wanted to speak, to explain, to warn them, but her body had finally hit its limit. Darkness pulled at her, warm and inviting, and this time she let it take her. When she woke, she was warm. The sensation was so foreign after the hours in the water that it took her several moments to recognize it. Warm blankets, warm air, the steady hum of a heater somewhere close by. She opened her eyes to find herself in a small medical bay, the walls covered with charts and equipment, a single porthole showing gray dawn light breaking over calm seas. A woman sat beside her bed, youngish with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing a fleece jacket with the Coastal Marine Research Institute logo. She looked up from her tablet when Arya stirred, and her face flooded with relief. "Hey, you're awake. Thank God. I'm Dr. Sarah Park, chief researcher on this platform. You gave us quite a scare." She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "Can you tell me your name?" "Arya," she managed, her voice hoarse from salt water and screaming. "Arya Chen." Sarah's eyes widened. "Arya Chen? The environmental researcher who filed the dumping complaint with Harbor Point PD?" Arya tried to sit up, alarm flooding through her. "How do you—" "Your report went through proper channels before it disappeared into that department," Sarah explained quickly. "It landed on several desks, including ours. We've been trying to verify your claims, but—" She trailed off, studying Arya's face. "What happened to you?" The story spilled out of Arya in fragments. The pier, the recording, the morning visit that became an execution, the sharks, the storm, the barrel, the swim. With each detail, Sarah's expression grew darker, her jaw tighter. "They tried to kill you," Sarah said flatly when Arya finished. "Those officers tried to murder you to cover up their crimes." "Yes." The word felt heavy, real, dangerous. Sarah stood abruptly, pacing the small space. "We need to report this. We need to—" She stopped, turning back to Arya. "Wait, you said you uploaded the footage before they took you. Do you still have access to it?" Arya's hand went to her wrist. Her father's watch was still there, its face scratched but intact. More importantly, the small USB chip she'd hidden in the watch band was still secure. "I have everything. The video, the GPS logs from my smartwatch, chemical analysis, all of it." "Then they failed," Sarah said quietly. "They tried to silence you, but they failed." Over the next hours, the story took shape. Sarah rallied her team. 3 other researchers who'd been monitoring the illegal dumping patterns for months, but lacked proof, lacking witnesses willing to come forward. Now they had both. They cleaned the footage, enhanced the audio, pulled every piece of metadata that proved authenticity. They documented Arya's injuries, photographed the bruises on her arms where the officers had gripped her, recorded her statement with the detached professionalism of scientists building an unassailable case. "The world thinks I'm dead," Arya said as she watched them work. "That's what they'll report. Missing person, probably drowned." "Then let's use that," Sarah suggested, an edge of steel in her voice. "Let's show them what happens when truth refuses to stay buried. If you think what those officers did went too far, hit subscribe and tell us what justice means to you." They crafted the post carefully. Not sensational, not emotional, just facts presented with devastating clarity. The video of the officers dumping barrels. The body cam footage they'd been required to upload to the department server. Footage that showed them pushing Arya overboard, their voices clear as they discussed covering it up. Her smartwatch GPS data showing her impossible journey through shark-infested waters. And finally, time-stamped photos of her alive, recovering, ready to speak. Sarah uploaded it at dawn from multiple platforms simultaneously. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok. Every social media platform that could carry a video, could spread a story, could turn whispers into roars. The caption was simple. They tried to silence the truth. The ocean wouldn't let them. Justice for Arya, truth in the deep. Within an hour, the first 1,000 shares appeared. Within 3 hours, 10,000. By noon, the video had gone viral in the truest sense of the word, spreading exponentially. Jumping continents, translated into dozens of languages by users who recognized injustice regardless of their mother tongue. News stations picked it up by afternoon. Breaking news out of Harbor Point, where a marine researcher presumed dead has emerged with shocking allegations of attempted murder by police officers. Arya watched it all from the research platform, wrapped in borrowed clothes, sipping hot tea that Sarah kept refilling. Part of her still felt like she was drowning, like this was all some hypoxia-induced hallucination, and she was still underwater. Still clinging to that barrel, still fighting to survive. But the phone calls were real. The interview requests were real. The messages of support flooding in from around the world were real. "You need to see this," Sarah said, turning her laptop around. On the screen, a live stream showed protesters gathering outside Harbor Point Police Department, their signs visible even from the helicopter's altitude. "Justice for Aria. Cops can't silence truth. The ocean remembers." "They're calling you the woman who wouldn't die," Sarah said softly. "They're saying you're a symbol of everyone who's ever been silenced, ever been dismissed, ever been told their truth doesn't matter." Aria stared at the screen, at the hundreds of people demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding accountability. 24 hours ago, she'd been one person with evidence and no platform. Now she was a movement. "I should make a statement," she said quietly. "They think I'm hiding. I need to show them I'm not afraid." "Are you sure? You're still recovering, and the media circus will be—" "I didn't survive to stay silent," Aria interrupted. "Set it up." The live stream went live the next morning. Aria stood on the research platform's observation deck, the ocean stretching behind her in shades of blue and green, sunlight dancing on waves that looked nothing like the dark violence that had tried to claim her. She was dressed simply, jeans and a borrowed Harbor Point Marine Institute hoodie, her hair still damp from the shower, her face bare of makeup that might hide the bruises. She looked real. She looked survivor strong. She looked like someone you couldn't break. "My name is Aria Chen," she began, her voice steady despite the camera, despite the knowledge that millions were watching. 48 hours ago, 2 Harbor Point police officers pushed me into shark-infested waters and left me to die. They did this because I discovered they were illegally dumping toxic waste in protected marine areas. They did this because they thought silence was easier than accountability." She paused. "Let that sink in. But you can't silence truth. You can't drown evidence. And you can't murder someone's commitment to doing what's right." She lifted her wrist, showing the watch. "This watch belonged to my father, a marine biologist who taught me that the ocean doesn't lie. It holds evidence. It preserves truth. And if you listen carefully, it will tell you everything you need to know." "I didn't survive to seek revenge," she continued. "I survived because someone has to speak for the reefs being poisoned, for the marine life being killed, for every person who's ever been told their concerns don't matter because they don't have power or authority or the right connections." Her voice grew stronger, powered by something deeper than anger. "I survived, so no one else has to go through what I did. So no one else has to choose between speaking truth and staying safe. So no one else has to wonder if doing the right thing might cost them their life." She leaned forward slightly, speaking directly to the camera, to the officers watching, to every person who'd ever used their authority as a weapon. "You tried to make me disappear. Instead, you made me impossible to ignore." The live stream ended. The internet exploded. Within hours, the mayor's office announced a full investigation. The police chief gave a press conference, his face gray with stress, promising transparency and justice. Internal Affairs opened files on not just Brennan and Maddox, but half a dozen other officers whose names appeared in the dumping logs Aria had recovered. The FBI got involved. When the investigation revealed connections to commercial waste disposal companies paying officers to look the other way, to help make evidence disappear, to silence whistleblowers by any means necessary. It wasn't just 2 corrupt cops. It was a system, but systems could be dismantled. And Aria had just handed investigators the crowbar they needed. The hearing happened 3 weeks later in Harbor Point Superior Court. The building was surrounded by media trucks, protesters and citizens who'd taken time off work to witness justice in person. Inside, every seat was filled, the gallery packed with people who'd followed Aria's story, who'd watched her survival become a symbol of something larger than any one case. Aria sat in the front row, flanked by Sarah and a lawyer from the environmental justice organization that had taken up her case. She wore a simple blue dress, the color of the ocean that had saved her, and her father's watch. Officers Brennan and Maddox sat at the defense table, their uniforms replaced by cheap suits, their confidence replaced by the hollow-eyed look of men who knew their story had already ended. Their lawyers shuffled papers, avoided eye contact, prepared for a battle they'd already lost. The prosecution presented the case with surgical precision. Video evidence showed the officers dumping barrels. Enhanced audio captured their conversation about taking care of the problem. Body cam footage they'd thought was safely deleted, showed them pushing Aria overboard. Showed Brennan saying, "Nobody will ever know." Showed Maddox's hesitation and Brennan's insistence. Then came Aria's smartwatch data, a digital breadcrumb trail showing her impossible journey, her heart rate spiking and dropping, her GPS coordinates moving through open water at the exact speed of a desperate swimmer fighting for shore. The defense tried to claim accident, tried to suggest confusion, tried to paint Aria as an overzealous activist who'd endangered herself. But the evidence didn't lie. The ocean didn't lie. When Aria took the stand, the courtroom went silent. She spoke clearly, factually, without embellishment or drama. She didn't need to perform. The truth was devastating enough on its own. "They looked at me and decided my life was worth less than their convenience," she said. "They gambled that the ocean would do what they didn't have the courage to do directly. They gambled wrong." During cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to shake her, tried to find inconsistencies, tried to make her seem less credible. "Isn't it true, Ms. Chen, that you have a history of environmental activism? I have a history of caring whether people live or die, yes. And isn't it possible you misinterpreted what you saw that night at the pier?" "I misinterpreted 2 police officers rolling toxic waste barrels into protected waters?" "No, counselor. I documented it." "But you admit you were trespassing." "I was conducting legal environmental research in public waters," Aria interrupted. "Your clients were committing felonies. There's a difference." The prosecutor smiled. The jury looked convinced. The defense attorney sat down. Final arguments lasted less than an hour. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes, long enough to review the evidence thoroughly, short enough to signal they'd seen everything they needed to see. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of abuse of authority under color of law, how do you find? Guilty. The charges kept coming and the verdict never changed. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Each word landing like a hammer blow. Each repetition a vindication not just for Aria, but for everyone who'd ever been silenced, dismissed, or endangered by people who thought their badge made them untouchable. Brennan broke down first, tears streaming down his face as the weight of consequences finally crushed through his denial. "I didn't mean for it to go so far," he sobbed. "We just wanted her to stop asking questions. You just tried to murder her," the judge interrupted, her voice cold as Arctic water. "You wore the uniform of law enforcement and used it as cover for attempted homicide. You betrayed every oath you took, every citizen you swore to protect. She sentenced them to 20 years each, with no possibility of parole for at least 15. The courtroom erupted in applause, breaking protocol, breaking decorum, but nobody stopped it. Even the bailiffs looked satisfied. Aria sat quietly through the chaos, feeling something inside her finally unclench. Not revenge, not triumph, just the simple, exhausted relief of being believed, of being vindicated, of knowing that her survival hadn't been meaningless. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like seagulls, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Aria! How do you feel about the verdict? What's next for you? Do you think this will change police accountability nationwide?" She stopped at the microphone cluster, the courthouse steps behind her, the ocean visible in the distance over the rooftops. "I think today proves that truth is more buoyant than corruption," she said carefully. "No matter how deep they try to bury it, it floats. No matter how hard they try to silence it, it speaks. Will you continue your environmental work?" "I'm going to do more than continue it," Aria answered, a smile finally touching her lips. "I'm going to make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. I'm starting a foundation, The Ocean Remembers, to protect marine environments and the people who protect them. We're going to fund research, provide legal support for whistleblowers, and make sure that truth-tellers have backup when authority tries to silence them." More questions followed, but her lawyer gently guided her away, toward a waiting car that would take her back to something resembling normal life, though she knew normal was gone forever. She'd been reborn in shark-infested waters. And the woman who emerged wasn't the same one who'd been pushed overboard. That woman had been naive enough to think evidence was enough, that doing the right thing would protect her. This woman knew better. This woman understood that justice required not just truth, but the courage to keep speaking it, even when silence would be safer. Months passed. The foundation grew faster than Arya had imagined possible. Donations poured in from around the world. Small amounts from ordinary people, large grants from environmental organizations, and justice-focused philanthropies. Within 6 months, they had full-time staff, legal partnerships, and chapters forming in coastal cities worldwide. Schools invited her to speak. Universities offered her fellowships. Documentaries requested interviews. But the moment that meant the most came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when a young researcher from Louisiana called her office. Ms. Chen, my name is Marcus Williams. I witnessed illegal dumping in the Gulf, and I'm terrified to report it because I'm black, and the officers involved are white, and I've seen how these things go. His voice shook slightly. But then I saw what happened to you. I saw that you survived, and I thought, maybe if I have backup, maybe if I'm not alone. You're not alone, Arya assured him. Tell me everything. We'll document it together. We'll protect you together. And if they come for you, the whole world will know before they can make you disappear. That call was followed by dozens more. Whistleblowers who'd been silenced found their voices. Evidence that had been buried found sunlight. Cases that had been closed were reopened. The Ocean Remembers Foundation became more than environmental protection. It became a model for how to stand against corruption without standing alone. On the 1-year anniversary of her survival, Arya returned to the bay where it had all started. The pier stretched into calm waters, the sunset painting the horizon in shades of gold and coral. The barrels had been removed, the officers prosecuted, the dumping stopped. The reef was recovering. Marine biologists reported, its colors brightening, its populations rebounding. She stood barefoot on the dock where she'd recorded the footage that changed everything, where she'd started the chain of events that led to her nearly drowning and then refusing to drown. The water lapped gently at the support posts. Peaceful now. Innocent. You tried to drown me, she whispered to the memory of that night, to the ghost of fear that still occasionally woke her in the darkness. You tried to silence me. But all you did was teach me that some truths are too important to let die. A splash drew her attention, close by, unexpectedly loud. A dolphin surfaced just meters away, its sleek form breaking the water cleanly, its eye catching hers for a brief moment before it dove again. Symbolic, impossible, perfect. If you believe truth can't be drowned, share this story and subscribe for more real justice. Sarah approached from behind, her footsteps soft on the weathered wood. Ready to go? The ceremony starts in an hour. The city was dedicating a new marine protection zone in Arya's name, 500 square miles of protected waters where dumping was now a federal crime, where monitoring stations would ensure violations were caught immediately, where the ocean would be allowed to heal without human poison seeping into its depths. Almost, Arya said. She pulled out her phone, opened the camera, and recorded a short video, just herself. The sunset, the calm water. 1 year ago today, I almost died in this bay, she said to the camera, her voice strong and clear. I survived because my father taught me to respect the ocean, because strangers on a research platform refused to look away, because people around the world decided that one woman's truth mattered more than a few men's lies. She smiled, genuine and warm. I'm not special. I'm not extraordinary. I'm just someone who refused to stay silent and got lucky enough to survive the consequences. But every single day, I meet people just like me. People who see wrong and want to make it right. People who have evidence and need support. People who are brave enough to speak if someone will promise to listen. Her reflection rippled in the water below, the setting sun creating a halo of light around her silhouette. So, this is my promise. I'm listening. We're listening. And we're not going anywhere. She paused, her voice dropping to something more intimate, more personal. They thought they could bury the truth in shark-infested waters. Instead, They created a tidal wave of accountability that's still spreading, still growing, still refusing to be ignored. The ocean remembers everything. It keeps every secret. It holds every truth. And eventually, one way or another, it brings everything back to shore. Arya lowered her phone, ended the recording, and posted it without editing. Within minutes, comments began flooding in. Stories of survival, stories of injustice, stories of people finding courage in her example, finding hope in her refusal to be silenced. She turned away from the water, linking her arm through Sarah's as they walked back toward the parking lot. Behind them, the sun sank below the horizon, and the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human drama, but somehow in its vast indifference, holding all the evidence humanity tried so hard to hide. Sometimes the deepest darkness brings the brightest light. Sometimes the greatest cruelty reveals the strongest courage. And sometimes, when the powerful try to silence the truth by throwing it into the abyss, they forget the most important lesson the ocean has ever taught. Truth floats, and those who survive drowning learn to breathe underwater, learn to swim through sharks, learn to turn terror into testimony and near death into eternal life. Not biological immortality, but something better. The kind of legacy that outlives any single person, that ripples across generations, that changes the very currents of justice itself. Arya Chen had been thrown away like garbage. She had returned as a tidal wave. And the waters would never be the same. The ocean remembers. The world watches. And truth, no matter how deep they bury it, always finds its way home.